Hi guys, welcome to the first video on the Horseface History channel. I just want to start off by giving a quick little PSA. We did have quite a lot of technical difficulties while filming this one. It is the first video that we've made. Problems were bound to happen. Mics aren't great, and I don't know whether you guys know what the coastal weather is like in Ireland during the winter. It sort of looks something like this. I've basically just gone over and dubbed the original video. All you could hear was the wind blowing. So if my hand movements seem out of time, that's just because I've recorded everything in post. We've saved it in post. It was also shot vertically, which really doesn't help, but had to make the most out of that trip to Buncrana. So try to enjoy, and thank you. Well guys, welcome to the first video on the Horseface History channel. Today we're going to talk about the scourge of penal Ireland, men who hunted men of the cloth like foxes across the countryside, the priest hunter. Today we're going to talk about one of their most infamous murders, here along the banks of Lough Swilly. So how did we get to the events that took place at Father Hegarty's Rock? The first attempts, in my opinion, come all the way back in 1366, the Statutes of Kilkenny, which forbade English settlers in Ireland from intermarrying, speaking Irish, playing hurling, and a bunch of other things. However, crucially at this point, the two countries were still Catholic. We'll not talk about how the only English Pope ever, Adrian, gave people backing to the English invasion of Ireland. That's a story for another time, but it does need to be said. Things, however, would ramp up with the English Reformation, when, in the words of the Wolf Tones, all across England and Ireland, refusal to accept this big fat man who wanted a divorce as the leader of your spiritual belief system, which people took very seriously in those days. It could land you eternal life or eternal damnation. Well, refusal to accept him would be met with a quick appointment with the Axeman. Many in England, such as St Thomas More, would meet their end for sticking to their guns. Briefly, persecutions would swap to the other foot under Bloody Mary, but under Elizabeth I, Catholics were seen as plotting traitors who couldn't wait to replace her with her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, or even worse, the Spanish. It's around this time that priest hunting really actually takes off in England. It's a slightly different form to that of what happens in Ireland, as priests in England would be hidden in what's known as priest holes. These are hidden rooms in houses of the landed gentry. There's a lot of Catholic aristocracy which still held a lot of their land in England, so this would be a lot different to the priests in Ireland who would be living it sort of in the rough, as we'll see later on, especially because the Irish gentry would have their land confiscated. Persecution of Catholics in England and Ireland would continue in Stuart England as well. The Gunpowder Plot really did not win them any favours with the new James I. It would, however, be the man who briefly replaced the Stuarts, Oliver, who would bring Catholic persecution to Ireland to a whole new level. Towns such as Drogheda and Wexford saw everybody put to the sword. The native Irish population had their lands confiscated, hence why the Irish gentry had nowhere to hide their priests, and people were sent west, to hell or to Connacht. Don't know which one's worse. Some were even sent off as indentured servants to the New World. With the restoration of the monarchy, there was a bit of a reprieve. Closeted Catholic Charles II would still execute St John Plessington in 1679, which is almost 90 years before the final priest in Ireland was to die for their faith. He was the last English priest to be executed, but of course an Irishman, St Oliver Plunkett, who the king knew to be innocent of any treason charges, would be the last to die on English soil 2 years later. Final words before his sentence to be hanged, drawn, and quartered were passed. Thanks be to God. Charles II was replaced by his out and proud Catholic brother James. And under his stewardship, the so-called Patriot Parliament repealed many of Cornwall's land laws and gave the Catholics their land back. Just a shame that the same hunchback gay man who had papal support and had just invaded England with a bunch of boats full of foreigners had now followed him to Ireland. A bunch of boats full of foreigners, backed by the Pope. Must be a loyalist's worst nightmare, this guy, huh? William of Orange landed in Ireland, defeated James, and sent him into exile, which brings us onto the final stretch of our speed run of 500 years of oppression up to this point. With William and Mary and their successor Anne on the throne, the penal laws were implemented in Ireland to utterly dominate the Catholic population on the island economically, politically, and socially, leading to the so-called Protestant ascendancy. That is, Protestant ascendancy if you conform to the Anglican Church. Dissenters such as Presbyterians would also face some amount of discrimination. It was in this environment, paired with the fears Catholics were conspiring with foreign agents once again, this time to put James's son, the Old Pretender, on the English throne, that in 1709 the Act for Explaining and Amending the Act to Prevent the Further Growth of Popery was amended. This forced all priests to take the oath of abjuration, swearing loyalty to the ruling monarchs. Failure to do so, or to carry out any other illegal activities such as mass, weddings, or ordinations, could lead to arrest, banishment, and even execution. While the act of priest hunting really wasn't anything new, it was now legislatively and judicially backed, with £20 for priests, £50 for bishops, which is more than 4 or 5 times the annual wage of one working man back in those days. It's in this environment that our story finally brought us to this spot in County Donegal, now known as Father Hegarty's Rock, where one of the most famous killings in penal Ireland was to take place. The largest landowners in the Inishowen peninsula that we are on were the Vaughan family, who were given the land after a failed rebellion in 1608. The Vaughan most important to this story, George, was born around 1650 and would go on to become a colonel in the British Army. When he returned to Donegal after his years at war, it's said that he took up a policy of Protestantizing the local population. Among other things, he would set up a Friday soup kitchen to feed his starving Catholic tenants. This would, however, come with the catch that to receive the soup you must attend a Protestant church service. Soup also had to be consumed in public, which brought the scorn against families who consumed the soup from their neighbours. One of the biggest obstacles Vaughan faced in the mass conversion was Father Hegarty. He was a registered priest for the parish of Fahan, allowing him to carry out limited priestly duties while still falling in line with the law, until 1709, when he became an outlaw for refusing to take the oath of abjuration. He was now fair game for Vaughan. Father Hegarty moved at night, carrying out masses, christenings, and other rites in the dead of night by candlelight. Many masses at this time took place at Mass Rocks, which acted as altars in remote areas, away from those looking to do the priest harm. Father Hegarty was from the area, and his sister still lived there too. His sister Mary was the only person entrusted with the knowledge of his lochside hideaway, bringing him food and supplies to keep up his meagre existence in the edge. He was married to a Thomas Doherty from Mahara. He's no wonder he sells him out in the end, he's from Mahara. Anyway, not content with the hardships of penal peasantry, he and the family's 2 sons would take the Friday soup against Mary's wishes. He hated watching his wife go off into the early morning mist, taking their meagre scraps off to her brother in hiding, Father Hegarty. Hegarty then became the dean of the parish, raising his bounty to a mouth-watering £50. To Vaughan, a landowner, this really didn't add an incentive. He really did just hunt priests for the love of the game. He didn't need the money. For a man like Doherty, however, it was a potentially life-changing sum of money, and he decided one day to follow his wife to the cave where Hegarty was hiding. Upon seeing the hideout, he made off with great haste to Buncrana, to alert Vaughan, who, with a troop of men, went out to catch the elusive priest. Mary was just leaving when she spotted the armed men approaching the hideout and alerted her brother to escape. The priest plummeted into the cold depths of Loch Swilly in an attempt to evade his would-be jailers. Hegarty, however, if he died at sea, the body couldn't be claimed, and therefore a bounty may not be gathered for Mr. Doherty. So, Vaughan promised mercy if the priest swam back to the shore. The choice of death or transportation, Father Hegarty chose the latter, and swam back to the shore here. However, once upon the shore, he was instantly seized, and Vaughan ordered him to be beheaded. Instead, his head bounced 8 times off of this rock before falling into the loch. Mary would go on to separate from her husband and live out her days with a sympathetic family in Buncrana. Doherty would get his money and a plot of fertile land from Vaughan. His sons would eventually join him in the family bounty hunting business, becoming the Bobas to his Django. This would, however, prove to be their undoings, and the 2 sons were supposedly killed by a poacher named Stumpy. Father was then thrown from his horse when he went to go to retrieve their bodies, killing him too. Sounds a bit like karma to me. It wouldn't be the last murder of a priest in the area. It's just across the water in Killygarvan, Father O. Hegarty, which is really lazy naming on the part of the writers, was shot by his captors as his parishioners attempted to rescue him from their clutches in 1734. By then, priest hunting was on the decline. The final priest to die for their faith, Father Sheehy of Tipperary, was to die in 1766, showing there was still a long road ahead. We'll have to make a video on some of the more famous hunters themselves, such as Sean the Saggart, and the people, Catholic and Protestant, who risked their life and limb to keep the priests out of their hands. Until then, a lot more planned, so stay safe, stay tuned. Thank you for watching. Finally, I just want to shout out the book The Priest Hunters by Colin Murphy. I basically just plagiarized it for the whole video, so if I got anything wrong, that's my source. Bring it up with him. Thank you and goodbye.